The room was already buzzing when I walked in. My aunt's house in Naperville smelled like it always did on holidays. Pot roast, and that lavender candle she kept on the sideboard, the one nobody ever moved. 40-something people packed into a 4-bedroom colonial. Cousins I only saw twice a year, trading handshakes and, "You look so grown-up" comments near the staircase. My uncle was holding court by the fireplace, laughing too loud at his own joke about interest rates. I found a corner near the kitchen and told myself this time would be different. It never was. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed that if I just tried hard enough, showed up enough, smiled enough, achieved enough, my family would eventually see me the way I saw myself. Not as the screw-up, not as the one who threw away a perfectly good future. Just as their daughter, their niece, their family. I was wrong about that for a long time. Let me back up. I grew up in a family that measured worth in credentials. My dad spent 30 years at the same insurance firm in Naperville, Illinois, working his way from junior analyst to regional director. My mom taught high school chemistry for 25 years and had a plaque on the wall to prove it. My older brother got his MBA from Northwestern at 26 and married a pediatric dentist named Audrey the following spring. At their rehearsal dinner, my dad gave a toast that ended with, "This is what we raised you for." I was 24 at that rehearsal dinner. I had just quit my job at a financial planning firm to start a YouTube channel about personal finance for people in their 20s, budgeting on entry-level salaries, navigating student loans, figuring out Roth IRAs when nobody ever taught you what a Roth IRA was. I believed in it with everything I had. I had student debt myself. I had sat across from coworkers who were brilliant, hardworking people, drowning in credit card balances because they never learned the basics. I wanted to help people like that. My family called it playing on the internet. Not all at once, not in those exact words, but it was there in the pauses. In my dad asking, "So, any real job prospects?" every time I came home. In my mom forwarding me LinkedIn job postings for financial analyst roles with no note attached, just the link. Like a message I was supposed to decode. In my brother asking, once, "What happens when it doesn't work out?" Not if, when. And then nodding when I didn't answer fast enough. The channel was called Sense and Sense. I know, it's a little on the nose. But it fit, and more importantly, it was mine. The first year was brutal. I was posting twice a week from a spare bedroom in my apartment in Wicker Park, using a camera I'd bought secondhand and editing software. I was still learning at midnight after working part-time at a coffee shop. I had 3,000 subscribers after 12 months, enough to keep going, not enough to pay rent. My family knew I was struggling. I think some of them were waiting for me to admit defeat. The dinners started to change around that time. I don't know if change is even the right word. Maybe they'd always been like this, and I just stopped letting it slide off me. Thanksgiving at my parents' house, my dad and brother sitting at the kitchen island with glasses of scotch. The kind of conversation that sounds casual but has teeth. My brother mentioning a colleague who had taken a risk on a startup and lost everything. My dad nodding slowly. Neither of them looking at me. Both of them absolutely talking about me. I sat down at the table and helped my mom with the green beans and told myself it was nothing. Christmas Eve, same house. My aunt, my dad's sister, had driven up from Springfield with her husband and their 2 kids. She cornered me near the dessert table and asked, in a voice just loud enough, "Claire, honey, what are you doing these days? Still the YouTube thing?" The way she said YouTube thing was the way someone else might say the shoplifting phase. "Still growing," I said. Right, she said, and turned to ask my cousin about his new job at Boeing. I ate my slice of pie and smiled and drove home and cried in my car in the parking garage of my apartment building. Not because I was ashamed, because I was tired. There's something specific about being dismissed by the people who are supposed to know you best. It's not like being dismissed by a stranger, which you can shake off. It's heavier. It accumulates. Every dinner, every still doing the YouTube thing. Every concerned look that barely disguised the judgment underneath. It layers up, and eventually you start carrying it with you everywhere. I want to be honest about something, because I think this is the part people don't talk about. I kept going to those dinners because I loved my family. That probably sounds naive to some people. Maybe it is. But I kept showing up because I still hoped that one day the conversation would go differently. That my dad would ask a real question about what I was building instead of when I was going to stop. That my mom would say she was proud even if she didn't fully understand. That my brother would look at me the way he looked at his MBA classmates, like I was someone worth taking seriously. I also kept going because I was raised to believe that family was non-negotiable. That whatever happened inside those walls, you showed up, you sat down, you passed the roles. I kept going and I kept hoping, and it kept not going the way I hoped. My channel hit 50,000 subscribers in the spring of my 3rd year. I didn't announce it at a family dinner. I told my best friend Nadia over tacos, and we took a blurry photo in the restaurant booth, and I posted it on my personal Instagram with the caption, 50K. What? And went home and worked on my next video. It didn't feel like the moment I'd imagined. The one where I'd get to prove something. It just felt like the next thing. The next family gathering was my aunt and uncle's anniversary dinner at a restaurant in Oak Brook. Nice place. Private dining room with a long table and floral centerpieces and a prix fixe menu. 14 of us. I came with a genuine desire to have a good time. I'd just had a really good month. A brand deal with a budgeting app that would cover 3 months of rent. A video that was getting more traction than anything I'd posted before. I felt, for the first time in a while, like I was on solid ground. I should have known better than to bring that energy into that room. Dinner started fine. Appetizers, wine, the usual catch-up conversations. My cousin announced she'd been accepted to a nursing program. Everyone clapped. My brother mentioned a promotion. My dad raised his glass. The dinner rolled on the way these dinners do. Each update about someone's career or kid or house functioning like a small bid for approval. Everyone hoping their news would land well at the table. Then my uncle, maybe 2 glasses of wine in, turned to me with the big booming voice he uses when he's performing for the table and said, "So Claire, still doing the internet stuff? When are we going to see you get a real career going?" The table shifted. Not dramatically. Nobody gasped, but I felt it. That particular kind of quiet that happens when a room is paying attention without admitting it. I took a breath. I said, "Actually, the channel is doing really well. I just hit 50,000 subscribers and I've been working with some." 50,000, my uncle said, like he was trying to convert the number into something meaningful. Is that a lot? For the niche I'm in, yes, I said. I'm starting to. I just worry, my mom said. And her voice was the gentle, careful voice she used when she wanted to say something that wasn't gentle at all. I just worry that it's not stable, Claire. What happens if the algorithm changes? What happens when people move on to the next thing? That's a fair question, I said. I've been thinking about how to. Your brother had job security at 25, my dad said. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his wine glass. That's not nothing. I know that. We just want the best for you. That phrase. I have heard that phrase so many times in my life, deployed in so many conversations where what it actually meant was, what you're doing is not good enough, and I am going to tell you so while framing it as love. I nodded. I cut a piece of my chicken. The conversation moved on. But something stayed in my chest for the rest of that dinner. Tight and hot. Not quite anger. Not quite hurt. Something that had been building for 3 years of dinners just like this one, and this time it didn't fully dissipate when the check came, and we said our goodbyes in the parking lot. I drove home on 88 West with the radio off, just thinking. The bigger dinner came that fall, my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. They'd rented out a private room at a restaurant in downtown Naperville, a real occasion, 60 people, a slideshow, a catered dinner, the whole production. My dad had been talking about it for months. My mom had bought a new dress. My brother and his wife flew in from Boston where they'd just moved for his new position. I came because of course I came. This was my parents' 40th anniversary. Whatever the complicated history, I loved them. I put on a good dress and did my hair and drove out from the city with a card and a bottle of wine they liked. The first hour was fine. Cocktails, introductions, old family friends I hadn't seen in years. I got pulled into conversations about Chicago traffic and the housing market and my cousin's new baby. Then dinner started and the speeches started, and I felt the room take on that particular formality that big family occasions have. Everyone performing their best version of themselves, everyone's accomplishments functioning as the through line of every story. My dad spoke first. He's a good speaker. Confident, measured, the kind of voice that fills a room without effort. He talked about 40 years with my mom. He talked about building a life. He mentioned my brother by name, talked about his career, his wife, what they'd built together. He mentioned my aunt's kids. He mentioned almost everyone at the table. He mentioned me once. And Claire, he said. And there was a pause before my name that I felt in my sternum, a pause that contained everything, is still figuring things out. Still figuring things out. The table laughed, the easy, gracious laugh people use at dinners like this when they want to absorb awkwardness without acknowledging it. My mom smiled at me from across the table, apologetic or reassuring, I couldn't tell which. My brother didn't look up from his plate. I didn't cry. I didn't make a face. I picked up my water glass and I drank from it, and I sat with what he just said, still figuring things out. My channel had 180,000 subscribers at that point. I hadn't mentioned it because these dinners had taught me not to mention it. Every time I did, it got minimized, reframed, questioned, and I'd stopped volunteering the information because absorbing the dismissal wasn't worth it anymore. I had a consistent revenue stream. I had a community of people, real people with real names and real lives, who had emailed me to say that my video on emergency funds helped them get through a job loss, that my Roth IRA explainer finally made it click, that they'd paid off their credit card for the first time in 6 years because of a budgeting framework I'd shared. I had built something. My dad didn't know that because I had stopped telling him. But he also hadn't asked. After dinner, when the speeches were done and people were milling around with dessert and coffee, my aunt, the one from Springfield, the one with the YouTube thing line from Christmas, came and found me near the door. She'd had enough wine to be fully herself. "It's sweet that you're still going with your little project," she said. "But don't you think it's time to get something more stable? You're 31, honey. These years matter." And I looked at her, this woman who had been making variations of this comment at every family gathering for 3 years, and something in me just went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means you're shutting down, the kind that means you've arrived somewhere. "I appreciate the concern," I said. "But I'm not struggling. I'm building something. There's a difference." She smiled the way people smile when they think you're being deluded, but they've decided to be kind about it. "Of course," she said. "Sense and Sense," I said. "That's the name of my channel. If you want to look it up sometime." Then I set down my dessert plate, went to say goodnight to my parents, hugged them both, and left. I drove home and I thought for a long time about what I actually wanted. Not what I wanted my family to think of me. Not the version of success that would make my dad's speech different at the next big occasion. What I actually wanted on my own terms with my own measure. And I thought about all the people I was making content for. The 23-year-old who messaged me last month, she'd just gotten her first real job and had no idea what to do with a 401k match, and said watching my video was the first time personal finance felt like something she could actually do. The guy in his late 40s who found my channel after a divorce and said he was starting over financially and needed to understand the basics from scratch and felt embarrassed asking anyone around him. The college senior who was the first in her family to graduate and had no one to ask about student loan repayment options. Those people were my family too, in a way. The one I had chosen. The one I was building. I kept posting. I stopped waiting for a particular outcome from my blood family, not bitterly, That took a while to get there, but eventually I stopped going to those dinners hoping they would say the right thing, and started going because I wanted to see my parents, and I wanted to see my cousin's kids grow up. And because I could have a decent conversation with my aunt about her garden now that I wasn't quietly bracing myself for the annual career assessment, I let go of needing them to understand. That was the thing nobody tells you. It doesn't happen dramatically. There's no scene, no final confrontation, no moment where someone says the magic words and everything changes. You just get to a point where their opinion of your choices stops living in your chest. It moves out. It stops taking up space. My channel crossed 500,000 subscribers on a Tuesday afternoon in February. I was sitting at my desk in the apartment in Wicker Park. I could finally afford to stay there without the part-time job, eating leftover pasta and editing a video about tax-advantaged accounts. The notification came up on my screen, and I stared at it for a second, and then I kept editing because there was a timing issue in the third segment I needed to fix. I texted Nadia, 500K. She replied with 17 fire emojis and then, dinner this weekend, you're paying. I told my parents at Christmas that year. Not as an announcement, not as a performance, just in conversation. The way you mention something that's been going on in your life. My mom asked how many subscribers I had, and when I told her, she got quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's a lot of people, Claire." "It is," I said. My dad asked if I made a good living. "A very good living," I said. "Better than I would have made staying at the firm." He nodded. He didn't say he was proud. He didn't apologize for the anniversary speech, or for 3 years of still figuring things out, or for the pauses before my name. We don't do that in my family. The explicit reckoning, the cleared air. Instead, at Easter the following spring, he pulled me aside before dinner and asked if I could explain what exactly a Roth IRA was, because he had a young woman at his office who kept asking questions about it, and he didn't know how to answer her. I sat with my dad at the kitchen table while my mom finished cooking, and I explained it to him simply, the way I would explain it on the channel. He listened carefully. He asked a few questions. At the end, he said, "You're good at this." I said, "I know." It wasn't the conversation I had spent years imagining. It didn't undo everything, but it was real, and it was ours. And sometimes that's the best version of things you get. Not the apology, not the grand acknowledgement, but the quiet moment when someone finally asks the question that lets you show them who you actually are. I still go to the family dinners. I go to my parents' house for Thanksgiving and Christmas and the occasional birthday. I sit at the table and pass the rolls. My aunt from Springfield still finds small ways to be slightly dismissive, and I have learned to find it almost affectionate. My brother and I are cordial. We'll probably never be close in the way I used to hope we would be, but we have reached the version of a relationship that works for both of us. And I make my videos twice a week, still. The camera is better now, and the editing software is something I know inside and out. And the spare bedroom in Wicker Park is a real studio with real lighting. The emails from people keep coming. The ones who figured something out. The ones who are less scared than they used to be. The ones who write to say I finally did it, about whatever financial goal they'd been circling for months. Those emails are the metric that matters. I learned something in those years of family dinners that I couldn't have learned any other way. The people who love you aren't always the people who believe in you first. Sometimes the people who love you are operating from their own fear. Fear that you'll fail. Fear that they'll have to watch you fail. Fear that they'll have to watch you fail. Fear that if you succeed on your own terms, it means something about the terms they chose. Their skepticism is not always about you. It is also about them. That doesn't make it hurt less in the moment, but it makes it make sense. And there's something clarifying about building something while people who matter to you believe you're going to fail. You find out what you're actually made of when there's no applause in the room. You find out how much you believe in yourself when the belief has to be entirely your own. I found out I believed in myself quite a lot. I also found out that you can love your family and not need their approval at the same time. Those two things can exist in the same person, in the same Thanksgiving dinner, in the same kitchen table conversation. You don't have to choose between loving them and knowing your own worth. You just have to be clear with yourself about which one you're living by. I live by mine. I used to think the hardest part of building something was the work itself. The late nights, the secondhand camera, the editing software I was still figuring out at midnight while working a coffee shop shift the next morning. That was hard, yes. But it wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was sitting at a dinner table full of people who loved me, genuinely loved me, I believe that, and feeling completely invisible. Not because they ignored me on purpose, but because the version of success they could see didn't include what I was building. And when you're 31 years old and your dad gives a 40-person anniversary speech and pauses before your name like he's apologizing to the room, something shifts in you. You either collapse under it, or you get very, very clear. I got clear. Here's what I've come to understand about how things actually work. Not in a tidy way, not in a way anyone handed me, what you put your energy into consistently over time, despite the silence and the sideways comments and the sideways comments and the still figuring it out moments, that compounds. Not immediately. Not in a way that anyone around you will notice at first. But it compounds. Every video I posted when I had 3,000 subscribers was practice. Every email I answered from someone who finally understood a Roth IRA was a deposit into something larger than I could see at the time. My aunt's dismissal at that Christmas dessert table didn't stop it. My uncle's, "Is that a lot?" at the Oakbrook restaurant didn't stop it. My dad's anniversary speech didn't stop it. They couldn't because I didn't stop. That's the thing about integrity, and I mean integrity in the structural sense. The way a building has integrity. The way a plan holds together under pressure. When what you do matches what you believe, deeply and consistently, it becomes load-bearing. Other people's doubt can't knock it down because it's not built on their approval. It was never built on that. I also think about the intelligence it takes to stay in something long enough for it to become real. Not book intelligence, not the kind my brother used to get his MBA. The kind where you look at your own situation honestly. This is hard, this is uncertain, I might be wrong. And you decide anyway that you know something worth knowing, and that other people deserve to know it too. That's not stubbornness, that's judgment. And judgment is a thing you develop by making decisions and living with the outcomes, not by waiting until someone gives you permission to trust yourself. Nadia used to say I was the most patient person she'd ever met. I think she was right. I was impatient about the work, always wanting the next video to be better, the next explanation to land more clearly. But I was patient about the timeline. I stopped expecting results on anyone else's schedule. That patience wasn't passive. It was a choice I made, over and over at every family dinner where I left feeling smaller than I arrived. Claire kept showing up. To the work, to the dinners, to herself. That's the whole story, really. Not the 500,000 subscribers, not the brand deal, not the moment my dad finally asked the question that let me show him who I actually was. Those things happened because of the showing up. The showing up was the cause. Everything else was just what followed.